Okay, welcome everyone. This is a woman's worth, pay disparity policies and the next steps. Tonight's nonpartisan forum is designed to offer a layered conversation, starting with understanding of laws on the books, moving into how workplace practices can drive change, exploring how grassroots actions can shape culture and advocacy, and finally, taking a deeper look at how structural inequities impact both immediate pay disparities and long-term generational wealth, and why understanding the difference between the two is critical in achieving true economic equity. So we have an outstanding lineup of speakers today who will bring a unique lens to this multifaceted issue. The leaders include individuals from labor, grassroots organizing, and academia, who are offering not just facts, but also tools and insights and personal reflections to ground this work in real life. Each presenter will provide a brief presentation, and we will close with a brief Q&A. My name is Nicole Keels-McGruder, and I am your host. I am the founding Chief Executive Officer of Community Hero PA. Community Hero PA is a nonprofit 501c3 dedicated to helping African American women achieve equitable health outcomes, build financial stability, and lead change in their communities and beyond. I want to begin by thanking our co-hosts for this very important conversation, the Coalition of Labor Union Women, National Organization for Women, Philadelphia chapter, and the NAACP Pennsylvania State Conference. Together, we are committed to advancing economic justice for women across Pennsylvania and beyond. So with that, let's begin by setting the stage, starting with a look at the current legislative landscape. So currently at the federal level, we have the Equal Pay Act of 1963 and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibit wage discrimination based on sex. However, enforcement mechanisms remain limited. The loopholes continue to allow pay disparities to persist. Here in Pennsylvania, several pieces of legislation have been introduced in recent sessions addressing pay transparency and minimum wage increases. Many have stalled in committee. So let's get specific on what's going on in Pennsylvania. And I'd like to highlight a critical piece of legislation that is in the PA House right now, House Bill 630, which was introduced by Representatives Melissa Schusterman and Jennifer O'Mara. I'd like to share directly from their memo as it frames the issue powerfully. But before I do that, I'd like to just do a very quick informal poll. Have you ever been asked by a potential employer what your previous pay was? I'm going to let you sit with that for a moment because I know that I have. And I bet that many of you have answered yes as well, and you're not alone. And that's one of the many issues that House Bill 630 seeks to address by prohibiting salary history questions during the hiring process. And the last note before I dive into the House bill is that it's important to remember that pay equity doesn't start with your first job offer. From a young age, girls are often steered towards lower paying career paths, undervalued roles, and away from high wage industries like STEM and finance. Add in caregiving expectations, discriminatory hiring practices, and promotion gaps, and the result is a persistent and systemic pay gap compounds over time. So that's why legislation like House Bill 630 is so critical. It addresses one layer of a much, much deeper issue. So now I'll go ahead and just read an excerpt from the legislative memo for House Bill 630. This legislation will prohibit employers from paying workers less because of their gender, race, or ethnicity, and protect employees from retaliation in any wage discrimination matters. Additionally, the bill will curtail the practice by prospective employers by using salary history in pay-setting decisions for new employment, as this has been shown to negatively impact pay as workers move from job to job. And it is past time that our Commonwealth ensures all Pennsylvania workers receive equal pay for equal work. For those who would like to read the memo and the bill for themselves, I will place a link within the chat. And when you do review that, because I encourage everyone to, there is a very significant statistic that talks about the number of women that would not be considered living in poverty anymore. I believe that statistic was 40% of women if there was equal pay. So please be sure to review that bill when you have the opportunity. So with that context in mind, I am pleased to introduce our first speaker, who will discuss workplace solutions to address pay inequity. And this is Angela Ferrito. She is the president of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO. She is the first female president of Pennsylvania's AFL-CIO. And Angela is a trailblazer, leading 700,000 members in their fight for job security and fair pay. She has dedicated her career to educating women about leadership and service, such as an instructor at the Northeast Region Union Women's Summer School for 11 years. Her accomplishments include being named Pennsylvania's #1 most powerful labor leader in 2022, receiving the Clara Day Award at the National CLUE Convention, and participating in the Women's Global Leadership Program with the UN on the status of women. Angela has successfully organized hundreds of public and private sector workers throughout her career with AFSCME, where she began as a local union president before joining Council 13 staff. She serves on numerous boards, including the Pennsylvania Workforce Development Board and the Governor's Transition Board. So I will now bring out Angela.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole. I'm really happy to be here tonight and happy to have the chance to talk to all of you about how I see pay equity in this country and give you a little bit of history on what we have experienced as women, and then also my viewpoint on how women can really reach true pay equity in this country. So, we can rewind back to 1963 when the Equal Pay Act was put into place, which prohibited sex-based wage discrimination. And it mandated that employers pay men and women equal wages for equal work. It really was the first step in this country to identify the problem, but it was not necessarily an end all to the problem, because then we could fast forward to 2009. In 2009, we had the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act that was passed and really brought forth by its namesake, Lilly Ledbetter, because she was being paid not as much as her coworker who did the same job. And so she brought a case against Goodyear Tire and brought a suit against them. And the case went all the way to the Supreme Court. And essentially, we saw an amendment being made to the Equal Pay Act of 1963 for 2009. And now we can fast forward to today, where we see a similar bill being introduced in the House in Pennsylvania, the pay for more pay fairness. And so I laid out this timeline just to set the stage that we are here in 2025 still fighting for equal pay for equal work for women. And every year we have a day, and it's a symbolic day. But it's a day that we lift up and we recognize, especially in the labor movement, and it's Equal Pay Day. And this day really highlights the gender pay gap in the United States, and it represents how far into the year women must work to earn what men earned in the previous year. So in 2025, Equal Pay Day will fall on March 25th. And this was the Equal Pay Day for white women. So that means that, white women, it took until March 25th to reach what a man the previous year doing the same work had been paid. And those days change and are exasperated when you look at different races and different demographics of women. It goes even further for African American women and Latina women and Asian women. So although we have acts that have been passed throughout history, and we're still fighting today for more laws to be put in place to level the playing field and to ensure that compensation and bonuses and overtime pay are equalized for the same day's work, we're still fighting. But there's one thing that I know, and I know it well, and that is that there's one defense that women have in this country, and that's to be a member of a union. When you are a member of a union, everybody who's covered in that bargaining unit under that contract is paid the same wage for the same job for the same work. And it also adds another layer of security because, as Nicole mentioned, a lot of the low wage jobs in this country are held by women. And that causes a lot of insecurity. And it's insecurity, there's housing insecurity and food insecurity and, childcare insecurity, healthcare insecurity. All of these things are covered, or I guess maybe not exactly covered, but helped when you have a union contract. Your pay is equal. You normally have some sort of language negotiated for scheduling, so you're able to get on a steady routine with your childcare. Because you are being normally paid at a higher rate than non-union counterparts. It helps with housing insecurity and food insecurity. There's benefit packages that are worked in, and that helps with healthcare, being able to go to the doctor, being able to care for yourself, care for your children. And it also really lays out wage scales so that you know when your next raise is coming, what it's going to look like, what it's when it's going to hit and where it's going to be. This isn't being determined by who the boss likes or whether or not you get along with your supervisor or whether or not you're a man. It really is determined through that legal and binding document. And so every year on Equal Pay Day, we wear red and we post it on social media and we talk about it and we raise awareness about this inequity that we know to be true. And every year on that day, I like to tell people the one thing that eliminates that is being a member of a union. And so I know that doesn't seem like a steadfast or quick solution, but it is a doable solution for everyone. And the path to unions really is the number one defense to closing the wage gap. And so, we know that so many low wage jobs are predominantly held by women, and that does cause an insecurity within the workforce. So by helping to alleviate that, some of the things that I believe unions can do is improve the conditions for women. They can raise the wage in these jobs. We can, protect and enforce wage and hour laws. Normally, most of our contracts come with paid sick days and paid time off, fair scheduling, equity, right? And that's really what it's all about, equity and equality. And so, by, I think, exercising your right to have a collectively bargained contract, it is, I believe, the most succinct way to eliminate these inequities that we see across so many of our sectors. And with that, I think I'm close to time, so I'm gonna hop off. But thank you again for giving me the time to share a little about how I view pay inequity and the solutions that I see.
And I want to first thank Angela for those very powerful insights on how union strategies can advance pay equity in workplaces. Your emphasis on collective action reminds us of the importance of solidarity in creating change. Our next segment includes a focus on community action and advocacy. I am pleased to introduce two speakers who will address different aspects of grassroots organizing for economic justice. First, we'll hear from the president of Philadelphia National Organization of Women, Vanessa Fields, who will discuss the role of organizing and civic engagement. Vanessa Fields is the president and former president of AFSCME DC 47 Retirees Chapter. She is the president of the Philadelphia chapter of NOW, chair for the Philadelphia Commission of Women, and also the Democratic committee person for Philadelphia's 52nd Ward, 10th Division. Ms. Fields serves on the executive board of the Coalition of Labor Union Women. She has memberships with the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, the A. Philip Randolph Institute, the Philadelphia and Lincoln University Alumni Association, and she is the chair of the NAACP Philadelphia's chapter of women in the NAACP. She received a Karen Silkwood Award from Philipposh for her work in preventing TB in the workplace. Her other awards include the Women of Moxie Award, the Mind of Men Community Outreach Award, and the MLK Labor Leader Award. Ms. Fields earned a Master's of Human Services degree from Lincoln University. Welcome, Mrs. Fields.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for allowing me to be a part of this very important discussion. So I want to say good evening, everyone. My role tonight is to discuss community action and advocacy. So my discussion will include, number one, the role of organizing and grassroots leadership. Number two, tools and campaigns for women's economic justice. And number three, encouraging civic voice and local mobilization. So as stated, I serve as president of the Philly NOW, which is the Philadelphia chapter of the National Organization for Women. NOW was founded in 1966 and is the largest feminist advocacy organization with over 500 chapters in the United States. Philly NOW has been advocating for women's rights since 1971. Our chapter is engaged in working to realize a broad vision for progress for women, which is predicated on intersectionality and inclusion. Now, 6 guiding principles are economic justice, reproductive justice, ending violence against women, racial justice, LGBTQIA+ rights, and constitutional equality, which is the Equal Rights Amendment. NOW was founded by 28 women at the 3rd National Conference of Commissions on the Status of Women in the United States. This was in June of 1966. The founders were frustrated with the way in which the federal government was not enforcing the new anti-discrimination laws. So even after measures like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is EEOC, employers were still discriminating against women in terms of hiring women and unequal pay with men. Women's rights advocates saw that these legal changes were not being enforced and worried that without a feminist pressure group, a type of NAACP for women, women would not be able to combat discrimination. So now was created to mobilize women, give women's rights advocates the power to put pressure on employers and the government, and to promote full equality of the sexes. Through tools of lobbying, town halls, giving testimony at public hearings and rallies, Philly now has collaborated with other like-minded organizations regarding the passing of the Fair Work Week legislation, mandatory training for city workers regarding identifying sexual harassment in the workplace, Domestic Workers Bill of Rights, and the Cure Report, which brought to light discrimination against women in the First Judicial District, which is Philadelphia. Now, organizing and mobilization right now is needed more than ever before. Under the current administration led by Felon-in-Chief, he's using Project 2025 to take women back to a time when we had no rights, y'all. So some of the things that's listed in Project 25 that our current president is looking at in terms of taking women back to a whole nother time are end of no-fault divorce, a complete ban on abortion without exception, ban all contraceptives, end civil rights and DEI protections in government, condemn single mothers while promoting only traditional families, and continue to pack the Supreme Court and the lower courts with right-wing judges. Now, let's be clear, y'all. All of these affect economic justices for women and our ability to participate in the workforce. You know, sometimes we think of things like, okay, how does banning or getting rid of no-fault divorce, how does that affect my economic justice? Well, if you're in a bad marriage, it impacts on you emotionally and sometimes physically and definitely economically. And it impacts on your ability to get to work, to be focused on work. So all of these things that you may not think, completely deal with that. Yeah, it does. It does. So it is important that we vote, that women vote, and get legislators in office who will craft and support legislation that ensures economic justice for women. Earlier, Nicole was speaking about a piece of legislation. It's important, y'all, that you elect the right folk who are going to support legislation that helps us. Now, one piece of legislation that PA and Philly now is keeping an eye on currently and informing people of is the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, which is known as the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act may sound harmless, but it's a dangerous step toward voter suppression. It will require strict proof of citizenship and could block millions of eligible voters, especially women, seniors, students, and communities of color from participating in our democracy. Basically, what the SAVE Act will require is every eligible voter to provide documentary proof of citizenship to register to vote. Women, trans voters, and anyone with a changed name could be disproportionately affected. Americans who have changed their name, like married women, would be required to secure updated documentation and to register to vote. There are an estimated 69 million American women who lack paperwork that reflects their current name. Mind you, federal law is clear already that only U.S. citizens are permitted to vote in federal and state elections. So currently, states decide how to enforce this requirement. So this act is clearly for the purpose of disenfranchising women voters. And let's be clear, y'all, women vote in large percentage for Democratic candidates. So the act passed the House of Representatives on April the 17th, 2025, and is now on its way to the Senate. So what I need you all to do is make sure you call your senators and tell them to vote no on the SAVE Act. Not just your senators. Listen, y'all, call everybody. Call your Senate, Republicans, Democrats, whatever. Call all the senators and tell them to vote no on the SAVE Act. All of this is being done to disenfranchise women, to put us back to a whole nother era when we were totally dependent on our husbands or whatever for our economic justice, for our income. When we look back in history, you see that women couldn't even get a credit card in their own name. So that this is all about controlling women. Let's be clear, very clear. This is about controlling women. But guess what, y'all? We're not going to go back, and we will not be defeated. So women are fighting back right now by attending town hall meetings of their elected officials. We're attending rallies, and we're running for office. So become a part of the resistance by joining organizations such as Philly Now. You can go to our website or our Facebook page, and the information is there regarding joining now. But also become the change you want to see. Yes, you become the face you want to, what you want to see. So run for office. Join Emerge. She Should Run. Emily's List, to find out how to run for office. These organizations are geared to women who want to run for office. Because a lot of times we don't know. We just know that we don't like what's going on. We want to run for office, but we don't know how do you construct a campaign? How do you get money for your campaign? These organizations will help you craft your platform, everything that you need to run for office. So in closing, remember the words of our forever First Lady, Michelle Obama. There is no limit to what we as women can accomplish. I want to thank y'all and fight the power, y'all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Vanessa, for those insights about grassroots mobilization and the critical role of having a civic voice in advancing change, and also calling out those key pieces of legislation. Next, we will hear about intergenerational leadership and specific campaigns on women's economic justice from the Chief Executive Officer of the Pittsburgh YWCA. Dr. Angela Reynolds serves as a Chief Executive Officer of the YWCA Greater Pittsburgh, an organization committed to eliminating racism, empowering women, and advancing educational and financial opportunities for girls and women of color. With a PhD in policy analysis from Carnegie Mellon University, she previously taught at the University of Pittsburgh and served as a senior director at United Way of Southeastern PA. Dr. Reynolds has received numerous recognitions, including the 2024 honorary doctorate from La Roche University, the 2023 Urban League Civic Leadership Award, and the 2020 Athena Award. Her extensive community leadership continues through her service on multiple boards, including Sustainable Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation, and the PA Long-Term Care Council. Beyond her professional work, she serves as an associate pastor at her church while raising 4 children and caring for her mother. So I would like to welcome Ms. Angela Reynolds.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And I also want to say thank you to Community Hero PA in terms of this invitation and this opportunity to speak. So I'm just going to very briefly talk about a few aspects as it relates to this issue. And you've already heard from Philly now in terms of some that the grassroots and also some legislation to which we should pay attention. When I think about this issue of gender pay equity, this is a matter that YWCA Greater Pittsburgh has been involved in for, I would say, well over 100 years. Our organization itself is over 150 years old. The reason I mention that is because when YWCA Greater Pittsburgh started, women did not have the right to vote. And we can have another discussion at another time regarding rights versus access. However, in 2020, we did celebrate or commemorate, I would say, the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. Why is that important? Because one of the aspects that I'm going to speak on is allyship. So when we think about allyship, in order for that to be passed, allies had to be formed, those who were in position of power to actually make decisions. We are still there today as it relates to issues related to gender pay equity. As Angela noted earlier, within the labor movement, there are negotiations that happen regarding contracts and that happen regarding what's set up for the entire segment of the union. When we come to this aspect of looking at different employers, different workplace practices, some things happening at the city level, some things happening at the county level, some things happening at the state level, companies that are dropping through that are not needing to abide by city and county and state regulations, it's important for us to recognize who our allies are in this work. So I want to elevate allyship as we talk about these issues. The other thing that I want to elevate is also intergenerational leadership. So at our website at ywcapgh.org, we have an opportunity for people to share their story as it relates to pay equity. What we have found in that sharing of the story is that it's important to get people across the spectrum because we need to show those who are in positions of power to make decisions that there are a spectrum of constituents, that there are a spectrum of workers who are being impacted and who are affected by their policies and practices that continue these inequities. Looking at intergenerational leadership also means making sure that we have those who are young leaders who are in positions of power as well, so that they can forge forward the next step in terms of an equitable and a just society and an equitable workplace. At YWCA Greater Pittsburgh, we have our regular governing board. We are a nonprofit organization. We're a 501c3. So we have our regular governing board, but we are also reestablishing our Young Leaders Board and providing opportunities for the Young Leaders Board and for the governing board to come together and also to connect with former board members. In order for us to continue the fight, in order for us to get to a win, we need to make sure that that next group of leaders is put into a position that they're able to not only affect change, but learn from the legacy and learn from the experiences of those who have been in the work. One of the other things that I want to state in my time here relates to where I said that you have an opportunity to share your story, and that is in storytelling. So when we think about the tools in terms of a campaign is being able to have people share their lived experience. I am a statistician by training. My PhD is in policy analysis, my master's in statistics. I can talk numbers all day. Numbers validate my argument, but I can tell you right now, they do not move people. And so there are some people who take the numbers and it's great, but when it comes to that, there needs to be a person and a community behind that statistic because that person is the voter. That person is the taxpayer. That person is the one who is holding the elected official accountable and also who is holding the person in charge of workplace practices and policies accountable for creating a workplace of excellence. So we want people to share their story. At the same time, we also make, at YWCA Greater Pittsburgh, we also recognize that there's trauma associated with that. So we also want to take care of the storyteller, that there's respect, that there is dignity, and that we're not exploiting the story for the sake of the movement. As we come and we share our lived experiences, that is a critical point and a critical matter as we collectively try to affect change as it relates to advocacy. When we started our gender pay equity campaign and we were looking at how we could actually move the needle, we looked around and said, who else is doing the work? And we selected two other partners. So our Level Up Greater Pittsburgh campaign is YWCA Greater Pittsburgh, along with Black Women's Policy Center and Women and Girls Foundation. And each of them also has an intergenerational component to their work. But we have discovered that that collective is also extremely important in being able to affect change. And then we expanded the partnerships beyond that. So allyship, coalition building, intergenerational leadership, storytelling, respect and dignity throughout the process. And also the final thing that I will end with is understanding that sometimes you have to take the win versus the credit. And I'll just share a very, very brief example. So within our gender pay equity campaign, we have been fighting for some things that have been mentioned already. So one is the removal of salary history, but we've also been fighting for pay transparency. And there were some tough conversations that we've had regarding that. And there was one of those conversations where I actually thought the change would never come. And then the change did come. However, our campaign was not credited for it. But the fact is, we got the win. And so as we get that win and recognizing that sometimes you may not get the credit, but as we build those coalitions, it provides opportunities for sharing best practices. And collectively, we can work to achieve gender pay equity. So I thank you for this time, and I will turn it back over to Nicole for our next speaker.
All right, everyone, we are coming to a close, and I want to thank Dr. Reynolds so much for that information and sharing those effective tools and campaigns that are making a difference in communities around Pennsylvania. Thank you so much for sharing the work that the Pittsburgh YWCA is doing. For our final presentation, we'll take a deeper dive into understanding the pay gap beyond the numbers. So I am pleased to introduce Dr. Tonya Thames-Taylor, who will discuss how structural inequities shape economic disparities and the important distinction between pay equity and generational wealth. Graduate of Tougaloo College in the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss, Dr. Thames-Taylor is a civil and social historian, professor, environmentalist, and human rights activist. She is an associate professor of history, a founding director of the African American Studies program, member of the executive committee of the Frederick Douglass Institute, and recently served as the interim director of Ruston Urban Community Change Axis, RUCKUS, Westchester University. In April 2022, she was recognized as one of the 150 most influential women at Westchester University. As a union member, she speaks frequently on pay equity and negotiation. From the coastal city of Gulfport, Mississippi, she currently lives in Coatesville, Pennsylvania, where she served as the president of the NAACP and the school board. Currently, she serves as a trustee at People's Hall, board member on Friends Publishing Corporation, board member of the Kennett Underground Railroad Center, the chair of the Women, the NAACP, WIN for short, for the NAACP Pennsylvania State Conference. And she belongs to several women-focused organizations and has led civic social and community organizations over the course of her very, very extenuous life. And we are so happy that we have Dr. Tonya Thames-Taylor with us this evening. And I will hand it over to you, Doctor.
Okay, well, you know what? I got to, you all, guess what? We're going to make this real fast. First of all, I like to say, shout out. I see some people. My friend Nancy is here from Texas. I see some folks from the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, the National Council of Negro Women, in the NAACP. Let me tell you something. Empowered women empower women. And that's what I'm going to talk about just a little bit and briefly, because you all, I got to do a Tony Stone. Tony Stone, who is Tony Stone? Well, let me sort of go to you. We're going to see this. Tony Stone is this woman here. She was actually in the Negro Leagues, right? And so I got a few minutes to sort of knock it out like Tony and handle it, right? And so therefore, what I'm going to talk about today, you all, is sort of looking at, and I want you to know, so there several things I want you to take away from today. We're going to talk about income versus wealth. But before we get there, what I want us to recognize is this. You all, we still not on Pay Equity Day when it comes down to Black women. Right now, when I'm talking about Black women in particular, right? You're going to win with women in the NAACP, all right? And so what happens is, look, basically, Pay Equity Day for Black women does not happen until July the 9th. Okay, so again, what does that mean? That means that when you look at Black women full-time year-round, they're only paid 66 cents of every white man's dollar. All right, over a lifetime, that's $1 million. Now, of course, we can sort of look at all of, you heard earlier about the structural inequalities. That's what other speakers have been talking about. Again, when you look at segregation, the lack of transparency, child giving responsibilities, discrimination, and the like sort. Now, what I'm going to talk about is going to really go to another area, because I want you to take out one thing about finances. Finances are personal. Now, how do I want to sort of have you to sort of look at this piece? I want all of you to think about is something called an ACE score. We all have an ACE score. Now, what an ACE score is how trauma has impacted your relationship with money. So again, we could go in and look at all the different factors, like, well, again, the structural equality, but again, finances and money is personal. And so therefore, once you sort of get, what is your relationship with money? Because then when you have your relationship with money straight, then that means that you're going to be willing to negotiate for yourself. That means you can be advocates for someone else. It goes into that line of reasoning. So then what do I mean by how adverse childhood experiences? That's what an ACE score is. And let me just tell you something. If somebody says, you know, strokes don't run in my family, I don't know why Jane had a stroke. It's because it could have been something that happened in her childhood. Based on your adverse childhood experiences, you can actually, it changes you at a cellular level. And if you grew up in some levels of poverty, right? Or you grow up in something where there's a want, or there's a desire and you didn't get it, it actually ended up shaping you. It stressed you. Now, what I wanted you to understand with that is that right now, with so many people losing their jobs, right? Like with the federal workers or the like sort. So the other day, yesterday, 2 days ago, NPR talked about how financial stress can damage not only your mental health, but actually your physical health. And so then when we're talking about this issue of pay equity, I want you to make the correlation for yourself. If you're wondering why you got a headache, I don't feel well, whatever that's going on, right? Just know that your financial health is a part of your wealth. It's a part of your major part of your wealth. Now, what is the difference between income and wealth? Income is what you get through your salaries. Okay, that wealth is something, and you maybe get some dividends and the like, so from interest. But for the most part, wealth is an accumulation of all that you own, right? All that you own, and then minus your liabilities and your debt. Now, again, you can be someone who's in a great financial situation, but based upon how your childhood was, let's take about Michael Jackson, for example. It can impact how they see money, how they negotiate with money, how they move in that. A lot of kids that you see that maybe sort of they blew up in the rap game, right? And you see, or somebody wins the lottery, and you wonder what happened to that? What happened to this person? They don't, because especially if they mismanaged it. What happens is they didn't make the correlation. They never got their financial health check together. So pay equity, right, and how you negotiate, how you understand money, how you move in money. It's really tied to that. Now, right now, I want us to sort of look at, I'm going to show you one little piece here about how do you cut down on like stress and how these things work. People will tell you things like take an inventory of your finances, keep a perspective in control, take care of your physical and your mental health. And those are all wonderful pieces to sort of how to get at doing that. And so with that said and done, I'm going to now, I want us to have some time for questions and answers, but here you got, you pulling out these things. What is your ACE score, right? And then at the same time, what is your personal relationship with money? I mean, basically, do you see that you grow up in a situation where money was survival and basically, you get stressed about it? So that's the first piece that you have to handle before we can have really any training about knowing and understanding your worth beyond what your pay scale is. All right, now I'm going to turn it back over to you, Nicole. I did a Tony Stone. And I'm going to try to now, I'm trying to see how I get off this screen here. I'm trying to get off the screen, but it's still sharing.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Thames-Taylor, for that very energetic and comprehensive analysis of a lot of the complex structural factors that perpetuate economic inequality for women, and also the important distinctions between pay equity and long-term wealth building. So I appreciate you and your time. I have invited all of our speakers back on camera as we open up the floor for a few questions. Ms. Ferrito had another engagement this evening, so she will not be joining us for the Q&A. But again, we are so pleased that she was able to join us for the time that she was. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A. But I do have a couple of questions that were submitted prior to the event. So we'll go ahead and start with those.
And also right now, I see that people can actually, could you share the links that I actually talked about? If you could share those with the people who are on the call, that'd be great.
Okay, sure. And so where did you place those links?
Put them in the chat.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, and Ms. Taylor also placed links in the chat that you all should be able to see as well.
Yeah, no,
and then after this call, I'll also, I'm sorry.
Host and panelists, that's all. So I just wanted to make sure that they get them, that's all.
Oh, sure. But yes, I do actually see them in the webinar chat. So, yep, so they have access to it. Yep, so you are good to go. So the first question I have for everyone that is remaining, what metrics beyond the simple wage gap percentage should we be looking at to measure progress on economic equality for women? Would anyone like to take a stab at that one? And I can repeat it.
I'll start on that one. So, and it's not an exhaustive and comprehensive list, but I will say one of the things that we have also been looking at is, again, because we care about salary transparency, is the number of postings that are actually starting to be more transparent in salaries. So it's important, particularly for women, to know what a position is going to pay before you get to the very, very last interview and the offer. And I believe that being able to see those postings and having that information is key. Another one that we've been looking at is pay grade analyses as well. So some only focus on what someone's being paid, but we also need to look at the pay grades. And there are inequities that occur within companies where the pay grades are lower for positions where women are more likely to be found, even though the job duties and responsibilities are similar to positions that are in higher pay grades, where the gender balance is different. So those are just two that I'll put forth as metrics that we've been looking at.
And also, let me just tell you, so I think Nicole, because I agree 100%, Angela, and I'm glad you're doing the work that you're doing. And now for mine, so when I think about matrix and I think about where to start, when I do my pay equity workshops, I always say, go to, Glassdoor, go to, all of the next door, go to the here to find out what it is, because what happens is people do two things. They either undervalue their work or they're overvalued your work. So now let me just tell you, a man will basically only operate at 63% and he will go in and demand an upgrade. Women believe that we have to operate at 110 before we actually move forward. And so again, it goes back to how you see and understand your wealth and how you understand finances and know the difference between income and wealth. Because again, the fact that we've been, conditioned to believe that, especially with Black people, and I'm just going to say this because I represent the NAACP, what happens is one of the most detrimental things that we tell, which is again a part of the structural discrimination that we face, is that you got to be twice as better. You understand that when you make comments like that, that means that you sort of impact how a person will go in and not only see themselves on the job, but end up negotiating, for any type of pay, any type of position. You don't have to be twice as better. What you have to do, and listen to me when I say it, you got to be sharp as a tack. You got to know what you're worth and what you bring. But again, we tell people even that now. We tell each other, you got to be twice as better. Don't do that. You got to stop that. That is an ACE trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't have anything. The only thing I would add to this is that, yeah, women have been, especially when you talk about women my age, I'm 69, and we have been conditioned. You're right. You're so right, Dr. Tonya, that as a woman, what do we call them? Men who are not even nowhere up to par. They can go in there and they present themselves like they're the best thing ever created by man, by God. We always go in there with this kind of attitude that we're not as good as, we're not as better, at the same level of. And we need to go in there, head up, shoulders back. I am all that and then some. We got to go in there with that kind of attitude. You really should. Women are more, there's a higher percentage of women, especially Black women, who are educated than any other demographic. And we have to stop shortchanging ourselves. I think it's, for me, so y'all know I'm on the grounds kind of grassroots person. For me, it starts here. It starts here, how you think of and believe yourself. Even when women run for office, a woman has to be asked 7 times before she will actually say, hey, you know what? I think I could do it. You don't even have to ask a man most of the time. They're going to tell you they're the best thing, that I'm running for this, that, or the other. So I just wanted to add the part to this conversation as it start here, y'all. Think highly of yourself. I know that's not what we've been socialized to believe and think, but you got to do that.
And again, just to layer that, going right back. And again, you have to understand the role that your childhood has played in what your encounter is. Now, one of the questions that you all that came from us is that they said, what can you discuss the tips of advocating for an increase in pay at your current job when you know that they are asking for more than what you're being compensated for? Okay, guess what? That's one of those trickery, because you actually believe that okay, if I go and I show myself worthy, they're going to give me the job, because that's what it looked like on television, those 30-minute sitcoms. That doesn't happen in real life. Okay, what happens is that, guess what, the more you do, the more they want. So what you need to do is that you start to keep, let me just tell you something very practical. Every week, what you do is you keep a diary about everything that you did on your job. and you say, okay, now this is a skill set that went to A, B, and C. You don't wait to your evaluation period where you're going to get all nervous because you're wondering how they like you and so on and so forth. And so what happens is you say every week, well, guess what? Supervisor John, Supervisor Mary, these are some of the things that I did this week. And so basically, and I hope that we're sort of looking at the effectiveness of how it was done. So you're going to have to talk about your own story. We like to talk about heroes, but remember, most heroes we talk about, for example, at Westchester University, we have a Frederick Douglass statue. Frederick Douglass wrote his own story. Maya Angelou wrote her own story. You have to know how to write your own story. As the kids say it in today's language, period.
Thank you for that. Ms. Vanessa, there's a question of you. Is there a link that you can share that highlights and delves into having to ask a woman 7 times before a woman steps up into leadership?
I know that I actually attended a training with Emily's List. So you can probably go on Emily's List, Emerge, any of those websites, and they will reference that, because I've heard it several times from different organizations that train women to actually run for office. And when I heard the number 7, I was like, wow, that's really profound, that we need to be asked that many times to run for office because we don't think we are as good as.
Thank you, Ms. Vanessa. So that was Emily's List. Thank you. Appreciate that. So if you all don't mind, I was just going to ask just one more question, and then we're going to close out for this evening. Are you all okay with that?
I'm good.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. All right. So how can men be better allies in the workplace when it comes to addressing pay disparities? And what specific actions would you encourage them to take?
Can't hear you.
I would say, oh, go ahead.
Majority, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Angela. So I was going to say that I think the majority of the pieces is that you have to start off just like a web, right? I always like to say, you know what? Everybody thinks a mosquito is small. Try to sleep at night with one in the room. All right. So what happens is, and see how that thing will eat you up. And so what happens is what you have to do is that you have to train you have to really inform the people around them. At this moment, Black women have access to their sons, to their brothers, to their cousins, and the like sort. And it's not just about having a conversation about getting the bag. It's about conversations about being on a job and teaching them to be an advocate, because sometimes you're not in the room. So when you have people or you have conversations with people, make sure that you are an ambassador for women and that you make the arguments to say, hey, look, if I don't get paid, I can't get, I can't get a certain cereal. I can't get milk. I can't get these pieces here. And so when you sort of make it in the family way, in the conversation about how families are impacted, not just an individual in a society that teaches about individualism, but how the family is impacted long term. Little kids can't get braces. Then they have developed a level of insecurities. Little kids can't do this. So again, it all goes back to how are you shaping that A score and how pay equity actually impacts that A score.
So I would add to that, when we're talking to men, in terms of them being our allies and advocates, men have these separate conversations in the cafeteria, at the area restaurant, on the corner while they're waiting to get their coffee or whatever from the vendor or whatever. When they're having these conversations about women, oh, she thinks she this, she thinks she that, she ain't nothing but a woman, she can't do this. What I ask you to do, men who are our allies, is to say, that's not true. A woman can do this, that, or the other. She does deserve that raise. She deserves that promotion. When they're having those separate conversations, and whatever events or whatever, you need to speak up. That's what I would say for men who want to be our advocates. When you're in these conversations with other men, speak up.
And Miss Fields actually used one of the things I was going to say, which is speak up and show up. And so part of that is First, it takes a level of education to know on what you should be speaking about. And I will share that I was in a situation, there were several of us who were women who were in a situation where men were being given more opportunities than the women. And we were trying to figure out what was happening. And it was because the conversations were happening in the locker room after workouts. Well, we weren't in the locker room,
Right.
but we were able to find out those conversations were happening because someone who was in the locker room made the statement. And so so first is to speak up, and then the second is to just show up. And that means that there are times if you're in a position of power, you got to show up for those who are not in the room. And then the other piece is when we, as women, particularly as Black women, say that there is an issue or a problem, we should not be the only ones who are alerting the higher ups and those in positions of power that has happened. There's too much that's on our backs, particularly as Black women, in terms of shifting the ship. It's too much of a weight and a burden. We're not the only people in the boat, so other people need to help out.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies, so much for that. And that will end our Q&A for this evening. So as we come to the close of this forum, I really want to sincerely thank of all of our presenters for sharing their expertise and insights tonight. Angela Ferrito from the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO, Vanessa Fields, President of Philadelphia Now, Dr. Angela Reynolds, CEO of Pittsburgh YWCA, and Dr. Tonya Thames-Taylor, Westchester University professor and NAACP Pennsylvania State Wind Chair. On behalf of this evening's co-hosts, the Coalition of Labor Union Women, National Organization of Women Philadelphia, NAACP State Conference, and of course, Community Hero, we thank everyone who joined us and participated with your thoughtful questions. This forum will be uploaded onto YouTube at Community Hero PA. Again, that's Community Hero PA, and also embedded in our website. And we will also be sharing it on social media as well. We will be sending out an email after the forum that has all of the important links that folks were asking for, so you have it in one nice place. We have placed it in the chat again, so those of you who are looking for them, everyone should be able to see them now, but we will definitely follow up. So as we conclude, I'd like to just share a few steps for continued engagement. So as a part of Community Heroes' mission to strengthen the financial well-being of women, we are starting community workshops that are being framed to help women business owners. And there is a link that we will be sending out, and you feel free to sign up. They will be in-person workshops, but everything from how do you create evaluation for your business, how do you create an exit strategy, how do you scale? Where do you go for capital when you don't have the credit? So we are working with some pretty fantastic partners who are actually authorized and certified in that space. So we want to make sure that we bring this to our community, because there are a lot of Black business women out there who are doing the work, but just need the tools and the knowledge to really take their businesses to the next level. So we encourage you to share what you've learned tonight with your networks, and consider joining one of the organizations that you've heard about tonight. All of their contact information is in the chat, and we will also send out their information after tonight's forum. And for ongoing updates, please visit communityheropa.org, or you can reach out to me directly at Nicole@communityheropa.org. Again, that's Nicole@communityheropa.org. So remember that advancing pay equities requires all of us in our workplaces, communities, and political systems. I thank you all for your participation for tonight, and look forward to working together with you to get this important work done. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Nicole. Yay.
Great job, Nicole.
Great job, Nicole. Great job.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yes.
Yes.